Hello, welcome to another episode of Skills-Based Health on Demand. Today we are diving into Standard 4, Interpersonal Communication. And I am joined by Kim Goforth from Columbia Public Schools. My name is Brad Brummel, Health and PE Coordinator for Springfield Public Schools. Hi, Kim.
Hello, how are you, Brad?
I'm doing great.
Good. Like Brad said, I'm up in Columbia, K-12 Health and PE Coordinator. Good to have you here.
Today, me and Kim are going to take you through learning related to Standard 4. And our learning objectives for today are to explain the 4 different components and stages of Standard 4. Standard 4 is a little unique. And so we're going to kind of show you the setup and the components of Standard 4. We're going to identify what mastery looks like and give you an opportunity to do the same thing. And then we're going to show you some examples of instruction and practice opportunities and give you the opportunity as well. So at the end of this video, these are the 3 learning objectives we would hope that you would achieve.
Sounds good.
We'll have a training guide for support of your learning. You can download it and access it through the description of the YouTube video. You can print it, write on it if you're a paper person like me, or you can keep it nice and organized in your Google Drive and it's a fillable PDF. So whichever works best for you.
Perfect. Well, let's dig in. So Standard 4 is interpersonal communication, and that sounds huge. And it's a very unique standard, like Brad said, so we're going to dig in here. And so this standard says that students will demonstrate the ability to use interpersonal communication skills to enhance health and avoid or reduce health risks. It's a big task. And I think about communication now with kids on technology. And so how can we bring some interpersonal communication skills back to more of a face-to-face because it's a little bit more intimate to talk about health stuff. So this standard, pretty big. We've got a big task ahead of us. So when we talk about this standard and break it down, it's going to feel different than some of the other standards that we've interacted with. And so if you've joined us for other sessions, it's going to look a little bit different. So the breakdown looks like this. So Standard 4 is that language that I just read to you on the previous slide. It's further broken down into 4 stages. Those 4 stages each have their own sets of performance indicators. And then in those performance indicators, then we have the teaching steps and sub-skills within each. And so that's why it feels a little bit bigger, but it's a powerful standard. And so we're going to kind of break it down by stage. So here's our stages that we will tackle today. Stage 1 is communication techniques. A lot of the things that you'll see over in the box on the right are what we usually think about when we talk about interpersonal communication skills. So when we think about that laundry list, and it's not comprehensive, that list could go on and on. But communication techniques, you'll see some of those reflected there. Stage 2, the refusal skills and boundary setting that we feel is so important for kids. You'll see some of those skills over on the right as well. Stage 3 is conflict resolution. Talk a lot about that in the mental health space as well. So you'll see some of those on the right. And then stage 4 is collaboration. How do we work together and communicate together? And some of those skills are also listed on the right. So all of the things that we think about with communication will be dumped into one of these 4 stages or multiple stages. So we'll talk a lot about the standard and then each stage of the standard. So that's where our focus is going to come here. So each stage has its own goal or its own focus. Stage 1, communication techniques, is going to focus on using various speaking and listening strategies that enhance health. So some strategies that you're probably familiar with are listed here on this slide. So stage 1 focuses on the very art of speaking and being a good listener. Stage 2 focuses a little bit heavily on the refusal skills and boundary setting. And so as you look at some of those types of boundaries and activities and strategies versus some refusal skill strategies, we've heard those, saying no and things like that. So setting personal boundaries for students, I think, is hard. And then finding the language that marries that skill together is a little bit tricky for students. And so that's what stage 2 really focuses on. Stage 3 is conflict resolution. So when we have some drama, I guess we can call it that, in our lives, not that not that kids have drama in their lives by any means, but let's give them some skills to deal with their drama. And so this stage focuses on addressing it and resolving it in a very calm and productive manner. It doesn't always go that way. So let's give them the skills and some strategies through stage 3. So that's my favorite one. Stage 4, important, I think, for adults too, is collaboration. And so how to work with a diverse group of people, all heading in the same direction, all heading in a very healthy lifestyle. And so putting people together can be a little bit tricky too. And so giving kids skills to collaborate is what the focus of stage 4 is. Again, a lot of information in all of those stages.
Yeah, Kim, great job breaking it down. I'm glad that they provided those 4 stages, because this skill is so important and it encompasses so much that it was important that they did that. It can be overwhelming at first, but once you get the flow, it really helps you understand that breakdown. And we always want to connect the standard and the skill back to our overall goals of health education. And so this is easy for me. I mean, to connect those 4 stages back to maintaining healthy behaviors or addressing unhealthy behaviors, being able to delay those risky behaviors, and ultimately empowering our students for health literacy. And I know that even as a parent, when I went through the training on Standard 4, it helped me with providing my daughter with better skills to stay out of the drama with her younger sister, and providing some of that health literacy and health language. And so I connect to this on a personal level, and I think that it's a great way for us to advocate for our health education programs, to be able to say that these 4 stages are so important, not only in health education, but in every content area and in every aspect of life. So I think it's easy to connect to our goals of health education here. And we would invite you to try to make a connection yourself with Standard 4. So on your training guide, take a moment to complete the opening activity. How do you think the standard can help us reach the goals of health education? And you may have different goals in your health instruction or in your health program. So connect Standard 4 to those goals, and take a moment to do that, please.
Great. So as a review, here's the big picture. Here's the big breakdown. So we've talked about the main standard. We've looked at each stage and the focus area or the goal of each stage. So now we're going to look at the standards performance indicators, and we're going to have the 6-8 grade span versus the 9-12. They're very similar. There is one word that changes from 6-8 to 9-12, and it's this first performance indicator, number 1. So at the 6-8 grade span, it talks about applying effective strategies and skills into your health and in life. And then in the high school side, it focuses on using it. So that verb changes from applying that skill to using it. And so then in the 6-8 and 9-12 grade span, the last 3 performance indicators use the verb demonstrate. And so use, apply, demonstrate, be thinking about that verb and what it means regarding the doing of your students. And so this one's hard. They're going to have to be communicating a lot and demonstrating that communication. So be thinking about those verbs and the differences, because they run very similar outside of apply versus use. But demonstrate is heavy in these performance indicators for this standard.
So now that you've become more familiar with the stages, and now that Kim just introduced the performance indicators, now is a perfect time for you to hit pause. You have access to the performance indicators linked in your training guide. Find your grade span and just make yourself more familiar by reviewing the performance indicators. And then we would invite you on your training guide to write down what performance indicator you're going to do a little planning for, dive a little deeper with in our next portion of today's video. So write that down, and then on question 3, you're going to say why you chose that performance indicator. Why are you choosing to dive a little deeper with that specific performance indicator and this skill? So we always like to use our backwards design as we are planning. This is important as we have talked about the goals of health education. We want to get our students across that finish line. We know that to do that, we need to be able to focus on our standards and performance indicators. But next comes, how do we know when our students have mastered the skill? Are my students getting this? Can they do this? How do I need to adjust my instruction or practice opportunities based upon that? And so Kim's going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like.
Great. So showing mastery for some of these communication skills, a little bit tricky. And also when we get to some of the resources, you'll notice that where I'm finding some of this information is separated by stage. And so this is just one example of stage 1 on mastery. And so if we look at performance indicator 1. So this is for the 6-8 grade span. And it is apply effective verbal and nonverbal communication skills to enhance health. That's the performance indicator. Underneath it, some of the student-friendly language on some of those to-dos, those look-fors that you want kids to be doing and showing you. I can analyze the context of a situation. I can use nonverbal active listening skills. I can use, so there you start to see that use language again. And so students need to hear themselves say, oh, I can use that. I can use tone. And here's how I do that. And then they can show you some of that. And so these are the to-dos for just one stage. And remember, there are to-dos for all the other stages. So it's kind of broken down that way. But that is an example of the language that you can use for this particular standard. So stage 2 for the 12th grade, for the high school grade span, same thing. I can explain why personal boundaries are important. Okay, reflecting back to the second performance indicator. So here's your to-dos for that 9-12 grade span. Again, a different stage. And so they're broken down again by stage. So if you're looking at assessment tools, thinking how in the world could I get all this to happen and really show them demonstrating or using, the top purple box is for the 6-8 grade span. Again, step 2. And so you have students practice their body language. And so in that practice, they're actually demonstrating. And so reflective questions are listed there too in that tool. And then the bottom purple box is for the 9-12 grade span, and they're creating a script. And so they are using the language to show you that skill. And so questions to ask for that script of their skit. Why is it important that this character's boundary is this way? So they're applying those skills, but actually using it. And so here's some tools that we'll talk about where you can find these, but to show mastery for this standard 4.
Great examples, Kim. So earlier on your training guide, you indicated a performance indicator that you wanted to work with a little bit more. So now we would invite you, using that performance indicator, what do your students need to do or show to demonstrate mastery? So use that specific performance indicator. You can write a friendly, kid-friendly I can statement. You could describe what assessment tool you may use, but what's it going to look like in your space for students to show or need to do what to show mastery? And so take a moment to do that on your training guide. And so next we would, with our backwards design, flow from our assessments and mastery to now providing our students the instruction and practice opportunities that they need to master that skill. And a lot of times these are married together when we talk about instruction and practice opportunities. And so we like to look at these together. And so Kim's going to provide us some examples of what that's going to look like.
Right. And again, by stage. So we're going to take each stage and look at teaching progressions. And we put the 6-8 grade spans and the 9-12 on one slide if they were a little bit different. So stage 1, focusing just on communication techniques. Grades 6-8 grade span, you can see the 3 steps there: examining the content, listening to others, and using effective speaking strategies. Now, step 2 looks different at 9-12. We still examine the context of what we're focusing on. In step 2, here's that verb use again. They're using the effective listening strategies. So 6-8, you're listening to others. 9-12, you're actually using those skills. And then step 3 is using those speaking strategies again. So stage 1 looks very similar except step 2. Now stage 2, progressing forward into the refusal skills and boundary setting, looks a little bit different again, and you'll see that funny verb again used in step 3. And so identifying boundaries, analyzing the situation, and then step 3, upholding my boundary in 6-8, if you think about that grade span, and then in the high school grade span, using appropriate ones for the appropriate context and settings. And step 4, Brad and I's favorite reflection piece for this particular stage, always our favorite. Stage 3, when we get to focus on conflict resolution, the teaching steps are the same for 6-8 and 9-12. Acknowledge the conflict, explain each perspective, make a compromise, and then reflect. So same across really the 6-12 grade span for teaching steps. Stage 4, the collaboration piece, again, the same for 6-8 and 9-12. Identifying the team goal. So teamwork makes the dream work, right, Brad?
That's
and
right.
Then step 2, examine their own personal role in that teamwork and that collaborative space. Support the team, what they can do to support the collaborative work, and then the favorite, reflect. So by stage, that would be the teaching steps across the grade spans, mostly the same except for those first 2 stages.
Awesome. I love how RMC Health has broken those stages down into steps and sub-skills. So thanks for sharing those.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to mention, so we focused heavily on 6-8 and 9-12. They do have breakdowns for pre-K 2 and then that 3-5 span too. So we're just focused on 6-8, but they are available across the pre-K 12 span.
So RMC Health always provides some teaching tips for each standard as well, and we're just going to highlight a couple. One teaching tip from grades 6 through 8 that can be applied K through 12 is just being aware that communication techniques and strategies are personal at times, many times. And so we want to be very careful as teachers and as trusted adults to make judgments upon whether a specific communication technique is right or wrong, or to push our own biases or our own strategies. We just need to know, and we need to communicate to students so that they can show that same empathy and skill set as well, that communication techniques are personal. Mm-hmm. And so one teaching tip for the high school, which again, I think can be portrayed at any grade level, is that team building can be a very important activity to help a lot of these stages and skills. And I know that those of us that are health and PE teachers, this is a activity that comes very natural for us to plan. Sometimes we have to alter our activities in a different space if we're in the health classroom, but these are activities that can really put students in situations and opportunities where they have to use these interpersonal communication techniques. And so these are great to use as they are learning them. After they've learned them, to reflect on how they're using those skills. But just if you can collaborate with your peers to come up with these team building activities for your health classroom, I think that they're powerful.
Yeah, very powerful.
So moving backwards, again, we have seen the standards, the mastery, we've gone through the stages and the steps. And so now Kim's going to break us down even farther and kind of give us what those practice opportunities look like and give us a little bit more insight on planning for the instruction.
Yes, I will give it a college try, Brad. This one's pretty big. So when I think about this big standard, I kind of put this overview that I needed to sort my brain out here. And so we start with our assessment, and Brad just talked about our backwards design model there. And so we look at our performance indicators and we look at the to-dos. And then because of the 4 stages, I need to really figure out, what am I asking my kids to do? Oh, that's better suited to talk about stage 3, for example. So I'm going to really hone in on stage 3. Then I'm going to go look at those steps, those teaching steps that we outlined for that particular stage. So I'm going to use stage 3 to walk you through an example. Then I will look at the steps and sub-steps of my stage 3. Then I'll plan my strategies for each step. And then I will go back and look at maybe one of the other stages. And so sort with me in your brain here. Let's just focus on stage 3. So we're going to go through an example for just stage 3, which is conflict resolution. And step 1 is acknowledging the conflict. And so several activities you can do here. We look at the sub skills, explaining some feelings. This is from the 9-12 grade span, if I didn't say that. Using some coping strategies, identifying reasons for the conflict, and then decide to engage or walk away. I think these are important things you can put out in front of kids. Where have they had some conflict in their life? And they will bring all kinds of drama stories to you to talk about the conflict that they've had to deal with. And so explaining their feelings with it and acknowledging that it is conflict and drama is step 1. And so as we navigate through step 2, digging into the different perspectives. Why was this conflict created? Maybe it's just different perspectives. And so activating background knowledge, I think, is huge when we're living in this space. Perspective could also deal with diversity and culture. And so it's a very important line to walk, but giving kids these skills, identifying the terms with I statements, assertiveness versus aggressiveness, using that language of health literacy, giving them some prompts to use to say, because I think when there is discord on perspective, we draw back. And if people draw back, there's always a group that's going to come at it. And so having some language for kids to use to explain perspectives in step 2, I think, is a critical skill to help them develop. Step 3 is to make a compromise. How can they shake hands a little bit and see each other's perspectives and then start to make some negotiations? And I think that focusing on the vocabulary in this particular step is huge, talking about how to negotiate, the questions you can ask each other, the give and take. So that compromise of step 3 will go a long way. And so then to step 4, when you can actually make that reflective piece on how did we work through the conflict from we analyzed that it was really happening, we listened to each other's perspectives, we made a compromise, and now let's reflect about it. Could we do it again? Do we both feel happy? Could we move past it and not hold any resentment and that kind of thing? Again, a good journaling practice for step 4. But if we were going to, that's our instructional piece, like that's our instructional step-by-step plan. So there's learning activities that we can do with that. Now, students actually engaging in the practice opportunities to put all 4 steps together and have a practice opportunity. I think the power of coming in with some type of video where their first step of practice would be to be a critic on these 4 steps. So there's a scene there's a scene in The Office where Michael Scott's trying to negotiate something for his company. So you can imagine how that conversation goes, right? And so really the conversation is the guy says, well, Michael, we'd like to talk about, and he cuts him off and says, no, we don't agree to that. So he doesn't even hear the other perspective. And so you can have students analyze each step of their own through a video clip. Same thing for the movie Hidden Figures. She's trying to negotiate her way into the big meeting. And she is very well spoken and she gives her 2 cents. And then he gets her into the meeting. So you can have students analyze someone else's language, how they made their point be heard, and that they made the compromise. And then the reflection piece as a whole class, I think, could be powerful to then take that out to a personal example that they would have to work the steps of just stage 3. So that's kind of the teaching setup, the instructional part of your planning, and then some practice opportunities that could encompass each step of one stage. That language is pretty big. So those are some practice opportunities for this particular stage of this standard.
And I could say that middle school students and high school students would be very engaged in that learning activity and would, I think, be very engaged at a high level on being able to break down and critique somebody else's communication strategies first, right, before they then turned around and put them, looked at the mirror and evaluated their own and reflected. So great job, Kim.
Right. Thank you.
So take a moment. you can use that performance indicator and that mastery that we've already walked through on your training guide. And now you can look at what would your steps look like for that indicator. If you want to start like Kim did and start fresh on a brand new stage, if you want to pick a stage and start planning that way, you can do that too. But find an opportunity where you can start identifying what will your instructions look like, what will the practice opportunities look like for the students, what will the students be doing, and then again, how will you know when your students get there? So that's this last part of the teaching progression, and we would like you to take the time on your training guide to do that. If you need support, just like me and Kim needed support, this is a big standard. And so please use the RMC Health Skill Guide as a resource. Notice on RMC that they break each stage down with a different skill guide. So on other standards, you're going to have one skill guide per grade span. This one, you're going to have a skill guide for every stage, which is very helpful. It makes the standard bigger, but it's very helpful when you're looking at those teaching tips and that health language and the suggested learning activities. So please use the RMC Health Skill Guides to your advantage as you are working through that part of the training guide. You can see the different examples here of what I just discussed, with the yellow arrows kind of highlighting some of those different areas. But again, they're free, easy to access, and they're linked to your training guide. So we all have a scope and sequence, and we all have to figure out how we're going to teach this skill and how it aligns with what we're already teaching, what content we're already teaching. When we use the HECAT and the HBOs, these are the different content areas that are organized. And again, these communication skills can be done really with just about any content. I feel that the beginning of the year is a great time to focus on this standard, because as you are teaching students these stages of communication, you are also building a community and you're building closer relationships with the students within your class, which are going to build trust and more of a sense of community as you go into other skills and other contents within your classroom. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the conflict resolution and boundary setting is going to partner very well with sexual health and consent. Kim, what else would you add to that?
I think some violence prevention too. I think that goes in there. And if we talk just mental health, using I statements is powerful just to get your feelings out there, to be able to communicate feelings in a way that people will hear and that kind of thing. So I think both violence and mental health, but again, like you said, it's just a great skill to have in general.
So take a moment on your training guide and write down some connections that you have. So you might have connections to content. You may also have connections to other areas of your building or community. But right now, we would just invite you to make a connection to Standard 4, whether it be content or other areas of your program. So as we wrap up, we just wanted to remind you of our different series that we offer for our skills-based health on-demand sessions. We are currently on interpersonal communication. We will be overall providing 8 videos for the 8 standards and 6 videos for different instructional strategies. I know Kim mentioned journaling earlier. There'll be a great video related to journaling. And if you haven't seen the Why Skills-Based Health Education or Making the Shift, we highly recommend those two. So we just want to thank you for joining us today on this learning journey. And we thank DESE, Missouri Healthy Schools, and MOSHAPE for providing this opportunity. And big thanks to Kim for tackling Standard 4. Well done.
All right. Thanks, Brad. Good to see you. Thanks, everybody.